Elon Musk calls out Twitter employee caught in Project Veritas video mocking his Asperger's. I don't know if you've been following. Well, obviously you've heard about the Twitter thing. He's trying to buy Twitter. And there's been a little bit of a holdup around bot accounts. A discrepancy. The reported figure under 5% of accounts.
Yeah, there's no way. No way.
Well, that's a lot of people seem to agree with you on that. So there's a further investigation. The purpose of the investigation could be either to escape the deal. Of course, there would be penalties associated with that, or to maybe as a negotiation tactic. We use the comparison of a home inspection. You find out something's wrong. You don't really want to back out of the deal. You're going to have to go fix that thing, and so you use it as a negotiation tactic.
Right.
And in his case, there's money coming from a variety of sources, and they may have their own requirements around active users and things like that, or their own expectations. You're going to want clean data going into it. You're going to want to know what you're buying. And
I feel like he would have, like, he may not be able to get like the exact percentage that Twitter has access to, but even before he even offered to purchase it, I feel like his team must have vetted out the rough percentage of inactive bot accounts. No?
I'm sure they have it, which is probably why there's a skepticism around the 5% number. But you might say, hey, we speculate, here it is. And then the Twitter team tells you, no, we've done the work and here's what it actually is. And then you say, I want to do my own audit. I need access. And then they say, absolutely not. And you can see how this goes down.
Sure.
So I'm sure if he believed the 5%, the deal would be done.
Right.
So he must have some sort of intuition, if not data, pointing at something else.
Yeah.
I mean, even his own anecdotal data, if he tweets what his replies look like, it's a lot more than 5% of the replies that are bots. But I know they target him.
Yeah.
In a more intense way, as you would, considering the amount of interaction, the opportunity represented by one of his tweets.
Yeah.
But anyway, the latest thing here is, how do Twitter employees feel about it? Not all of them are fans of Elon Musk, and not all of them are fans of his plans. And so there's been, I guess, some investigation into the sentiment and some of the Twitter's internal strategy and policies. And it's just, there's been a microscope on Twitter that didn't exist prior to the same extent.
Yeah. I mean, anywhere Elon goes, the scopes come out, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's any kind of possibility that he actually just walks away from this?
My understanding is that that's difficult to do at this point. It would be expensive.
Yeah.
But it certainly is possible, right? If things look a lot worse than they actually, I mean, Twitter struggled for a long time to make any money. Mm-hmm. And even when you're the richest person in the world, seemingly it's not as easy as, well, some have the perspective that it means you can do whatever you want.
There's still rules and regulations.
Rules, regulations, and how do you do things that aren't going to impact or affect the wealth you've already created? And so, like, even this deal, for example, you got all these external parties contributing funds to make it happen, because you can't just be selling all this stock in Tesla. There's rules around that. Yeah. How liquid he can actually become, even though he happens to be worth all this money, without impacting his core businesses, and of which there are plenty at this point. Then there's the attention component, which is speculation around, if he's so invested in Twitter and if he takes on the CEO role, what does that mean for my confidence in Tesla or SpaceX or whatever else? I
thought that was interesting when there was news that he was going to buy this, that Tesla's stock was affected.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird to me, that as investors, like, that shakes your confidence in Tesla's ability to generate revenue down the line or grow as a company. That, like, someone's interest is in somewhere else. Like, that, I don't know, that's weird to me.
Well, isn't there only so much of him to go around, so many decisions he can make on a daily basis, how much input he can have on decision making once it's split up into a number of projects?
Sure, but it's not like he's calling every shot at Tesla.
Absolutely
he's got
not.
incredibly smart people that know the direction and the vision that they have.
Right, but confidence in the market is not necessarily logical or reasonable. And if his attachment, he's probably the biggest influencer in the world, either him or Kim Kardashian.
It's got to be him.
But the reason I bring that up is because he is an engineer. He's the marketing team. It's kind of like, it's like when Steve Jobs died.
He's kind of like the brand.
He's the brand. He's more than any person can be. He's representative of an idea.
He also has the vision.
Well, we assume he does.
Sure.
We assume he does. Like Apple's been okay, right? But how would it be different if Jobs never died? I don't know. It's hard, but they've been okay. Certainly, the bank account's been fine. The profits have been okay. Tesla is very likely full of incredibly talented people.
Right.
However, the market judges things based on superficial elements. What do I see? What do I know? If I'm investing, I mean, even when you're talking about startups and you have like incubators and things.
Sure.
And they say, well, we're not investing in your idea. We're investing in you, the entrepreneur, because we believe in you specifically as a founder. Okay. And even if you pivot into something else, that's where we want to go.
They will still follow. I see. Okay.
So anyway, it's probably exaggerated in his case. But anyway, what ended up happening here was a hidden camera with a Twitter employee. This is all alleged, obviously, where he goes on to explain that, I'm going to paraphrase, like basically Twitter is not responsible to for providing free speech to people, and there's I mean, he just kind of exposes the fact that there's some level of, I don't know if censorship's the right word, but
no, that's exactly the word.
Manipulation of
it's censorship, straight up.
Sure,
right? That's the word I'd use.
But it's actually maybe even more than censorship. When you're manipulating the conversation, when you're deciding what to promote and not promote, you're kind of the arbiter of truth, right? You get to decide what is and what isn't for most people. So it's even beyond censoring one thing. You're also picking the thing that you choose to amplify.
Yeah.
And so there's a real hefty responsibility in that once you start making those calls, which is part of the reason why Elon's been saying it's got to be open source, how everything works, why a particular post is elevated versus another. And I don't know if you're using Twitter much right now, but even enabling the chronological button over the algorithmic.
I don't use Twitter much, but I know the chronological thing. Wait, what's your take on this? Do you feel like Twitter should have that power to control conversations like that?
Well, the argument...
Is this too political of a question to ask you?
No, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
That's what this show, we do.
Okay.
We talk about everything.
Sure.
The argument here is that because they're a business and because they have advertising, much like YouTube, or you can remember around COVID, they're like, don't say the word COVID. Actually, now that I said the word COVID, when this episode goes to Spotify, it'll have a warning now.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Just because I said the word.
Interesting.
But you see how all these private companies they're trying to find ways to satisfy their advertisers because they're all advertising models, which is the other reason why Elon brought up the only way we can do this is if we move towards a subscription model and people are willing to pay for Twitter.
Right.
Because as much as this guy, I don't even know, like, here's a quote. Some of my colleagues are like super left. They're like, this would be my last day, the senior engineer said. We did all we could to, like, revolt against it. A lot of the employees revolted against it. But at the end of the day, the board of directors have the say, and then they acted on their best interest because they didn't want to get sued. He's talking, obviously, about people internally, their opinion around
the buyout.
Yeah, the buyout, or being involved with Elon in any kind of way. But I guess there's, like, the philosophical answer to your question, and then there's the business answer to your question.
I just want to know your thoughts on it.
I know, but it depends on where you're placing me because I post here on YouTube and I understand the advertising model. I also understand the subscriber model because these people give us super chats. They give us direct support. In a direct support environment, absolutely not. Stay the hell out of it.
Yeah.
In an advertiser environment, because I interact with advertisers, I get it.
Yeah.
That if that's how the cameras stay rolling, you can't. That's who runs the business, not you.
Yeah,
they do, And all of our big tech products we interact with operate that way. Apple doesn't operate that way. Increasingly, other brands are moving in those directions. Even Google getting into hardware, talking the way they're talking about privacy, creating nightmare scenarios for companies like Facebook and Meta and they even get into hardware in order to kind of circumvent some of these restrictions and some of the things that Apple has done.
Yeah.
So we're in a different phase on the internet right now where maybe Twitter is the public square. And if it is, then maybe the advertising model is not the right one. Mm-hmm. And if it isn't, and you can find a way of running it on a subscription basis or paid for by the users, then absolutely not. No one should have that degree of control over what gets seen and doesn't get seen. But it goes further because then we have to decide where the barriers are, where the lines exist. Because obviously there's still doxing, there's still threats.
Yeah.
There's still certain circumstances where there has to be some governance.
I never really considered it like that. But the whole, like, the fact that advertisers need that control on that, right? So
the biggest example that I've been a part of was Adpocalypse on YouTube, where a couple of behaviors, fringe behaviors, and unintentional placements. So you would have fringy content that made it through the great filter of YouTube.
Right.
Then you would have a high-profile advertiser like Unilever show up beside it. Then you would have a series of emails. And then you would have a complete shutdown of the entire business model of the world's second biggest website and first biggest content sharing platform, or at least video watching, whatever you want to call YouTube.
Right.
That's all it would take. And that the platform itself could do nothing about it.
Yeah, that was weird.
That there was no other way to sustain the business outside. And why do you think now there's been all this investment in alternative revenue streams on platforms like this, like super chats, like paid subscriptions, ways to
go around advertisers,
diversify the model in order to make it more robust and less susceptible, because you have no leverage.
Yeah.
So
if you'd like 10 minutes ago before I asked you that question, I had a very clear thought as to like what I would like my opinion on it. But I don't know. I feel like I see what you're saying now. It's not like I would have taken the stance of like nothing should be censored, like whatsoever. Like whether or not you believe it or not, it's your own thing, but it shouldn't be censored. But I do get why Twitter has to deal with this.
Yeah, and it's also, I guess, the typical corporate structure with a board of directors and shareholders. Who really gets to make the call in that environment, which is the reason that this acquisition had to be private. And it's the reason why Elon's toyed with the idea of taking other companies private, including Tesla, and obviously got in trouble for that famously. Much like shareholders are kind of like advertisers.
Yeah, exactly.
They slap you on the wrist and they remind you who's in charge.
Yeah. And
they kind of influence the trajectory of a company. So this is, I presume this is his motivation in this acquisition. He said, this is the public square. This is where speech and conversation is happening. It needs a complete overhaul. I don't want to be a shareholder. I don't want to be on the board,
right? Which
was initially discussed. The whole structure has to change. The way that revenue is generated.
Do you think Twitter would live? Like, would the platform survive having where it's a paid model? The entire thing is a paid model for the users.
I think it would have to be a combination, right? Much like YouTube, there would need to be a diversification of revenue streams. So
but at the moment you bring in advertisers, now you have to start censoring content.
Yes and no, but it does give you leverage. So like if there's another adpocalypse on YouTube, and YouTubers have done a good job of building out their alternative revenue streams, they might stay, and in which case viewers might stay.
Right.
Merch and like you see how YouTubers figure out ways to insulate themselves and their businesses.
I haven't.
Well, okay. But
Some YouTubers, sure.
it's a common kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And so that could, I suppose, happen on Twitter. But there's no clear way to do it because people don't want to pay for tweets.
Yeah.
People don't want to. You already have it. They've tried recently with super follows. You would pay for one account, or of course, it happens with YouTube Premium. You get a percentage of the revenue generated from the person's premium subscription, and they never see ads again. It's pretty cool. Now, Twitter, I don't think is as valuable for most people as the places they watch video. But could Twitter add more video? Sure, they could.
And the ads aren't nearly as obnoxious.
On Twitter?
Yeah. They're bad, but compared to like ad on like a video platform,
Right.
it's awful, right?
But let's say Twitter did add video, and then some of the prominent accounts on Twitter started to produce video.
Yeah.
And they incentivized it. They invested in it early and then turned that into subscription. Like Spotify has somehow figured out a way to compete with all the giants. Because guess what they did? They got content that people wanted and they packed it behind a paywall. And they said, good luck. Like, could Twitter do the same? Could they go after talent and say, you're exclusively on Twitter? Sure, they could.
That's so weird. The idea of that is so weird.
It's a weird idea, but it's been employed elsewhere. Now, Twitter, it's because of our perception of Twitter that it's just simply,
It's like,
it's still 140 characters. I mean,
Yeah.
it isn't, but you can't even edit tweets.
Right.
And we're talking about, but Twitter had Vine before
Yep.
TikTok existed.
yep.
They have spaces.
Twitter had Spaces. They're experimenting. And by the way, I'm not saying that they're ready right now.
NFT collections.
I mean, they're just experimenting, but I'm certainly not saying that they're ready right now. But anyway, in this video, the Twitter employee does not come off in the greatest light whatsoever, targeting Elon in a personal way over his Asperger's. And I mean, pretty much nobody likes what's going on here. It's not a good look for Twitter or Twitter employees. However, it is worth noting that this individual, and I don't know if people care about this, but they were recorded unknowingly.
Yeah. Both Twitter employees got catfished, apparently.
Yeah.
They were on dates.
What's crazy about this particular clip is that
Wow.
this person talks about being targeted in the video. In the secret video, he talks about how other Twitter employees are being catfished in videos.
And
he's saying, if I hadn't met you organically, then there's no way I'd be here right now.
But he thought,
But meanwhile, he's getting got
wow.
Yeah.
in the clip. So
And they're high up. I think one of them is Twitter's lead client partner, Alex Martinez. And the other is a senior engineer, Saru Maruga-san. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a good
That's
look.
uncomfortable.
And they also
Jeez.
exposed certain elements about the company, and it kind of enhances Elon's argument
Sure.
and encourages probably greater investigation from the general public into how Twitter operates and how they want it to operate. And Twitter might change even without him just because of all
Because
this.
of this, yeah.
I mean, if he bounces, people they might have a different perception of what's going on there.
Sure.
There's a lot of exposure here going on.